Hey everyone, this is Kevin T. Rodriguez, film critic of iCritic.net. Welcome to my channel. Thank you so much. Let's talk about the Academy Awards today. The Academy Awards is pretty much the biggest movie night for all of Hollywood. Getting an Academy Award is kind of like winning the Super Bowl if you're an actor, director, or screenwriter. It is a peak achievement that very few will ever have, and it is considered a great honor. You immediately go into the history books if you are an Academy Award winner, and that designation follows you forever. However, it is also considered a huge honor to be nominated. Just simply nominated. You can at least be called a nominee, like you maybe didn't win, but you got very, very close to winning the top prize. One of the problems is that when you don't win, well, sometimes you get forgotten. And there are some movies, some very good movies that have been nominated for Best Picture that basically nobody watches anymore. And I kind of want to make this video to highlight some of those movies in a top 10 list of, in my opinion, very worthy Best Picture nominees that for whatever reason people don't watch anymore. Now, this doesn't follow that much of a strict 10-to-1 standard, other than the fact that maybe the top, few on the list are really worth watching, even though people don't seem to talk about it anymore. And I would like to know whether or not you agree, if there's some that I missed at the end, and whether or not you've seen any of these. So let's get started. Although, before we get into the main list, there is one honorary mention I want to put on this list, and that would be The Patriot. And the reason I'm putting The Patriot on this list is because this is a unique movie in the Best Picture nomination lineup. This is the only movie that is lost. We have no complete or near complete copy of this film. The Patriot is the only movie nominated for Best Picture that we pretty much can never see again, unless by some miracle a copy is found. And considering this movie was nominated way back in the late 20s, early 30s of the 1900s, it seems very unlikely we're going to find the film at that point. And so I kind of want to highlight this as a reminder that just because you are a big movie, you are not above getting lost, and why film preservation is really, really important. Moving on though, let's start the top 10 list with number 10, and that is Anchors Away. Now this one's really low on the list because unlike other movies on this list, there is at least one part of this movie that has been seen quite a bit by a lot of people, and that is the very famous sequence where Gene Kelly does a dance with Jerry the Mouse from Tom and Jerry. An extremely memorable scene. It shows that animation can definitely be cinema, that this is the most memorable sequence of the film. But that being said, the rest of the movie is also really enjoyable. It was nominated for Best Picture. I believe Gene Kelly was nominated for Best Actor in this movie. It is a very charming musical about a couple sailors who come on to a seaport town and fall in love and do their best to woo the women of their dreams. It is family friendly. It is extremely charming. And while I am definitely glad that this sequence with Jerry has survived and continues to be watched on YouTube today, the whole movie itself is also a very enjoyable watch, and I would like to highlight that so that anyone who likes that sequence, even though the rest of the film is completely live action, they might enjoy the rest of the film as well. Number 9 on this list is a movie called Hope and Glory. Now this is a World War II British drama about living in World War II during, the height of the war. Now, there's been a lot of movies made by World War II, but the interesting thing about this movie is that despite the burned down buildings, the bombings, and the serious subject matter, it's actually, as the title suggests, a very hopeful film and kind of almost a rosy view of how some people actually managed to live generally happy lives as best as they could during really unfortunate circumstances. Of course, it doesn't sugarcoat what happened in the war, and there are some severe sad sequences in this movie, but we can only control we can't control when we're born. We can only control how we adapt to situations. Hope and Glory is about kids who basically made the best of a bad situation, and I think it's a really charming drama, and it's a shame people don't watch it anymore. At number 8 on my list is a movie called The Dresser, which is probably a little bit more slow moving than most of the movies on this list. This is about a lives or is friends with a dresser. He make suits and things like that. And his life is kind of coming to an end, and he doesn't really have a whole lot to live for. He's not depressed, but he's kind of just going through the motions, and she becomes a very unexpected friend to help him make the most of his life and to basically keep him from loneliness. It's a really touching story. It's nothing too flashy. I'm honestly kind of surprised it was nominated for Best Picture because it's so low-key, but nonetheless, it is a very touching character drama and definitely one that's, it shouldn't be forgotten. Let's put it that way. Number 7 on the list is Witness for the Prosecution, and I kind of hesitated to put this one on the list because it actually is famous for being a movie with a great twist ending, one of those don't spoil the ending of the movie type films where it's like the twist at the end heightens what came before. But that being said, despite having this notoriety, I have never heard any movie YouTube channel talk about it. I've never heard any awards pundit reflect on it, and it's a shame because it is a really good movie. Obviously, it's a courtroom drama, and the whole case hinges on a elusive witness that could clear the prosecution's name, but that witness is hard to find, and the search for that witness is very interesting. Now, here's the thing. There are better courtroom dramas, I will admit. Charles Laughlin's acting as the judge is a little over the top at times. But that said, it is a solidly structured legal thriller. It's got some great character development, and again, there is that ending, which don't let anyone spoil it for you, but it definitely was like, ooh, yeah, that's that's definitely something to experience. The 6th film on this list is a movie that I actually do hear being talked about all the time. I just don't hear anyone actually watching it. It's called The Conversation, and this was actually directed by the great Francis Ford Coppola. Now, the reason people talk about this movie is because it is a famous movie trivia question, like what actor's entire filmography resulted in Best Picture nomination. Now, that actor is John Cazale, and he was in The Godfather Part 2, The Deer Hunter, and The Conversation. I think there was like one more film he was also in. I can't remember, but I'll put it up there if, during the editing of this. And the thing is, all these movies were nominated for Best Picture. Some of them won Best Picture. But here's the really interesting thing. The Conversation doesn't seem to be watched very much, and it's weird because it's a really, really good movie about a CIA agent who was listening to recordings and comes up with a dilemma when one of the recordings suggests that someone he's listening to might have committed murder. The problem is that person who may have committed murder is someone he doesn't necessarily want to turn in for reasons I will not explain here. So The Conversation is an excellent thriller. It's definitely showed that Francis Ford Coppola was more than just The Godfather and Godfather Part 2. He made other great movies, and it's really a shame that this one is not watched that much, even though it's frequently part of the movie trivia scene. Number 4 on the list is a family film called Sounder, about a generational black family who experiences the troubles of the segregation time period. Sounder is the name of the dog, and the dog in some ways is one of the only bits of happiness the family have. And this is like a really moving film. Like I watched it, and it's like, it's very interesting that it was sold as a family film, because even though I think it is a very good family film, it's a harsh family film. It's got some harsh realities in it, and yet it's still rated G, and I think it's actually something that kids should be almost forced to watch, just so that we can understand how different life was back in the 40s and 50s and 60s. And it's a really wonderful movie. It almost seems like a miracle that it was nominated, and yet I don't see anyone talking about it anymore. I don't know if people consider it politically incorrect or something. I don't know what would be politically incorrect about it, but it's a wonderful movie, definitely worth checking out, especially if you've got kids. Number 4 on the list is Howard's End. Now, this is an interesting one. I believe this actually won some Academy Awards, and it was a huge hit at the time period. It got like multiple Oscar nominations, and yet nobody talks about this one anymore. Like nobody. I don't know anyone who's even seen it, if I'm being honest. It's very interesting. It's kind of about class warfare in a way. It's about two married people, and they've got money. It's just their views on poor people are very different. One of them feels like poor people should be embraced and treated humanely, while the other feels like, you know what? poor people are poor, rich people are rich. We live in our own separate worlds. And that's just the way things are. And considering the fact that these two people are married is what forms the backbone of this huge conflict. It's not the easiest movie to make sound exciting, if you will. It's definitely a little difficult to make this sound like a must-watch film, but it is a very good movie and highly recommended. It got those Oscar nominations and wins for a reason, but nobody seems to watch it anymore. Number 3 on the list is a movie that I actually just recently watched. It's called The Turning Point. This is about two former ballerinas or dancers, I guess. I mean, I guess they're not necessarily ballerinas, but they are dancers who used to dance together, and life took them on different paths. And the fact that one of those dancers' daughters wants to become a dancer has now brought them back together in a very contentious way. This actually got 11 Oscar nominations. It didn't win any. I watched it. I was floored by how good this movie was, and I was amazed that this did not survive the test of time. I mean, other movies that year that were nominated, like Star Wars, that obviously is still talked about. In the Best Picture winner that year, Annie Hall, that was definitely a worthy win, but The Turning Point was such a great movie that it seems like a shame that this one just isn't watched anymore for whatever reason. Thankfully, at least as this recording, it's on Max, and that's where I saw it. I don't know if it's going to be there forever, but if you have not seen this one, yeah, it's really, really good. The number 2 film on my list is a movie called Bugsy. It was directed by Barry Levinson and starred Warren Beatty. This one's a strange one. It got 10 Oscar nominations. It has an all-star cast. It's a gangster film about a mobster who realizes the potential of Las Vegas and opens the Pink Flamingo in the middle of the desert where there's no one there, and basically starts the Las Vegas we know and love today, the city of sin, if you will. And this is just such an engaging movie, really fun. One of Warren Beatty's best performances, a great supporting turn by Harvey Keitel, and a very sassy lead performance by Annette Bening. I am truly, truly surprised that this movie seemed to fall off the map really early, because to my knowledge, it was never huge. Outside of the 9 or 10 Oscar nominations it got, it never really seemed to penetrate the film zeitgeist. No one talks about it, and yet it is probably one of the best mobster movies I have ever seen. I don't get it. And then the number 1 film on this list is by far the most confusing, because for a while, this was a huge film. This was talked about, this was watched, and then one year it just kind of disappeared. And that is Robert Redford's Quiz Show. This is a movie about the quiz show scandals of the 50s, where basically the quiz shows were rigged. People were winning large sums of money. People were tuning in to see their favorite person win all this money. The thing is, the person was being given the answers. It was rigged, and nobody knew. This was like this huge deal. Now, I remember this movie because I remember this was a huge player at the Oscars. I mean, it only got 4, but it was actually considered a potential to win despite only having 4 nominations. I remember it played on TV all the time. I remember seeing as a kid. I just remember everyone talked about this movie and they loved it. And then one year it just stopped. Nobody was watching anymore, and then nobody talks about it. And I haven't talked to anyone in years who has watched this movie, and it's strange because, in my opinion, this is one of the great crime dramas. I mean, in some ways, it was a victimless crime. No one was actually hurt during the crime, but it was a huge deception, and it was kind of like the planting of the seeds for how TV could manipulate people in ways that even they did not realize. And so it may even be more important now, considering the controversy with reality TV and the news being biased. You can see elements of Quiz Show in the media today. It should be more relevant than it was in 1994, but it's not, and in fact, no one seems to really watch it. I don't even know where you can stream it, to be honest. I've got a DVD that's not even anamorphic. I don't know if this thing has even been released recently on a new Blu-ray or DVD. I've still got the crusty old thing, and it's a shame, especially since it's from Robert Redford. I know he's known as like a pretty boy actor, but he's also a great director. This was one of his crowning achievements, and yet nobody talks about it. So those are my picks for great Best Picture nominated movies that nobody watches anymore. Have you seen any of them? Do you agree that these should be watched more? Are you going to seek some of these out now that they're on the list? And what are some that you would have put on the list? And hey, you want to see more lists like this? What other topics should I discuss about movies that either won or were nominated for awards that nobody seems to watch anymore? I would love to know. Comment below, like, favorite, share, subscribe, and as always, flame responsibly. Have a good one.